Hi there, this is Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. My guest this time out is my country, Ireland's Ambassador to the Czech Republic, Alan Gibbons. With the Dublin government taking over the rotating presidency of the European Union on July the 1st, I sat down with Alan to ask what that means for Ireland and for his own role. We also discussed the scenes in March when thousands of Irish football fans descended on Prague, the differences between Irish and Czech attitudes to the EU, and much more. That's for this edition of Prague Talk. What first led you to the Department of Foreign Affairs in Dublin and the whole world of diplomacy?
I think it was probably grown up in a family that was interested in what happened outside the front door. They were, I suppose, interested in current affairs, in political life. I went on to study economics and political science in university in Dublin. And I suppose from there, it wouldn't have been the most huge leap in the world to consider a career in diplomacy. I have to say, it wasn't when I was studying in college. I didn't really have a very clear idea of what I would end up doing in the workforce, but this opportunity arose. The advert was brought to my attention by my good Irish mammy. I applied and was accepted, so I joined the Foreign Ministry immediately out of college after my postgraduate year. So I went straight in there.
Prague is your first ambassadorial position. How was it initially finding your feet when you landed?
Yeah, it's my sixth assignment overseas with the Foreign Ministry since I joined more than 30 years ago. But it's my first head of mission post, my first role as ambassador. And I have to say, I'm here in Czech Republic almost 3 years this summer. And arriving, really, I felt I was really quite spoilt. I was landing into an embassy team that they were doing a great job, into an Irish community that was very welcoming, to a diplomatic community that was also similarly welcoming, and also my engagement with Czech colleagues and interlocutors, from the outset was really very warm and welcoming. So I have to say I had a pretty charmed initial run-in.
And how do you find your feet, or how do you know what's what? How quickly does that whole process happen that you feel like you're on top of things?
Like in any new job, any new position, there's a lot of learning by doing. I think we'll all acknowledge that. And I suppose the first few months you really are trying to figure out what way is up. You're running the embassy, you're trying to make contacts, build contacts, trying to put yourself about town, put yourself also, after the first few months, also try and get outside Prague as well, which has been one of the real pleasures of the posting here in Czech Republic.
The Irish embassy is down the street from the considerably larger American embassy, but the country does have a very well-appointed residence where you live in leafy Prague 6. What's the background to the purchase of the residence and to the whole Irish diplomatic mission here in Prague?
Ireland opened our resident embassy here in Prague in 1995, and that same year the Czech Republic opened its first resident embassy in Dublin. So it was a real symmetry to that. So last year, for example, we celebrated our 30th anniversary of having a resident embassy here. And it was very much a push at the time. It was the mid-90s. It was a push and a realisation, I think, by Ireland and the Department of Foreign Affairs that we needed to be present and engage in Central and Eastern Europe in a way that we simply hadn't been. And opening here in Prague was the beginning of the rollout of a number of missions, a number of embassies that we have subsequently opened across the region. So we were very fortunate. We've been, our chancery, our office building, we've been in the same place for the last 31 years. Similarly, our residence is, as you say, out in Bubenic in the lovely Prague 6. Initially, we were renting from the Czech state, and about 20 years ago, the Irish state bought the property, which is, I think, hopefully it's turned out to be a really fabulous investment because it's a great statement property.
One frequently asked question that I receive is, how big is the Irish community in Prague and Czechia? Can you monitor that in some way?
We don't insist on Irish citizens registering with us. Some other countries do. We don't. We encourage it. But we usually go with the Czech statistics, and that for Irish citizens living in the Czech Republic, the number is around about 1,000. So not a huge community, and I suppose there's a bit of variation to that community. There are members of the community who are here since the 1990s and who settled down, very settled, maybe married or settled with a Czech partner. And then there are others, of course, who've arrived in the intervening period. Some of them, again, long stays, and some of them shorter. And of course, we have a more transient population of students, Erasmus students in particular. Czech Republic and Prague is very popular with Irish students. So we're also delighted to see them come.
My sense is that maybe the majority of Irish people here are in business. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, to one degree or another. Yeah, absolutely. They're I think probably the folks that arrived in the 90s, they were very focused on opportunities, on taking up business opportunities, and especially, and many of those are still in business in one respect or another. And I suppose since then, there's been a bit more of a mix.
I presume you're in constant contact with your bosses at home in Dublin. What are they most interested in when it comes to the Czech Republic? Is it Czech politics?
I suppose one of the huge bonds that draws Ireland and the Czech Republic together is our common membership of the European Union. In other words, what happens here isn't just of abstract interest to my authorities back in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, or to the Irish government. Irish ministers, the Taoiseach, our Prime Minister, they're all sitting around with Czech ministers and the Czech Prime Minister every week of the year. So what's happening here politically, what's happening here economically, what's happening here socially is of material interest to us in Ireland. So you're absolutely right. There's a keen interest in reporting from Prague. And as I say, it's not in some sort of esoteric way. This is what's going on there. Yes, we've read the report, the media reports, but what's actually behind that particular aspect of policy that the Czechs are taking on policy X, Y, or Z.
Ireland seems to be viewed positively by much of the world, which I presume makes your job a little bit easier. But still, what kind of image is Ireland actively seeking to portray?
I think we're seeking to portray an image, hopefully a reality, of a positive, progressive, open, outward-looking country that is open to the world, that depends on our prosperity by doing business, goods and services, trading with the rest of the world. And that's very much in common. We have that very much in common with the Czech Republic. We're both smaller countries, dependent on the outside world, depending on trade. So I think that image is we project, but I think personally I believe that it's accurate.
And in your experience, how do Czechs tend to view Ireland, or what image do they have of the country, or how close might it be to reality?
I have to be honest, I think we have a job of work to do to raise the profile of Ireland in the Czech Republic. As I say, we're fellow EU member states, but sometimes it can feel like we're a bit distant in spite of having so much in common. One of the aspects I think that really is a fantastic way of creating connections is culture. Especially, and I'm really thrilled about it, that Czech people, in my experience, are really interested and engaged with Irish music, song and dance and literature. You can go to the O2 Arena here on certain Saturday nights and have 6,000 people, Czech people who've paid their good money to see, let's say, an Irish dancing extravaganza. That's really impressive. Also, I'm really impressed by here in Prague alone, there's 6 or 7 Irish dancing schools, and they're all run now by Czech people, and mostly their students, both adults and kids, are Czechs. And that's a fabulous kind of localizing Irish culture and kind of making it Irish culture with a Czech accent. It's fabulous.
But where does this come from, do you think? Obviously, you can't answer that question, but You must wonder sometimes, why are they so into it?
I do, and I thank my lucky stars that they are. To be honest, I think there's real resonance since the 90s. I think when particularly Irish dancing was having its international moment, and rather than having a moment and passing on, here it's been so impressive and so really terrific that rather than having that moment pass on, it's been localised and it's been grounded, and there's new schools opening, and the state of I would say of Irish culture here is really, really strong. Also, we have an Irish Studies Centre at Charles University. You can study Irish literature there, but you can study Irish literature in the English language or in the Irish language. Again, it's just so brilliant to see. And not just here in Prague. You can also study Irish studies and the Irish language, indeed, in Olomouc, in Pulaski University there. And soon you'll be able to do the same in Liberec. So it's Irish and Irish studies is really getting out there here.
To digress for a second, this month, 30 years ago, Václav Havel visited Ireland, and there were photos of him in a pub in the Dublin Mountains with Mary Robinson, who was president, and, of course, Sinead O'Connor, the great singer. You, I found out recently, were involved in the background to this whole meeting. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I was in 1996. I was a very, very green and junior officer in the Irish Foreign Service. I was working in what we call the protocol division, so that's like particularly working on visits, high-level visits into Ireland. I had worked on the President Clinton visit in the autumn of 1995, and then the next big visit that I worked on was the President Havel visit at the end of June of 1996, and this was just on the cusp of our 1996 EU presidency. So I was a protocol officer, and actually the event that you mentioned in Johnny Fox's pub in the foothills of the Dublin Mountains was an event that I was working on, and I was assigned to welcome Sinead O'Connor to the event, and it was a really special evening, and it was a number of artists were invited to participate, and it was really pushing on an open door because Václav Havel was such an inspirational figure in Ireland in the mid-1990s, and we had Sinead O'Connor and a number of other performers and artists come join that evening. It was a very memorable one.
This country, Prague in particular, got a lot of attention a couple of months ago when the Irish football team were here for a World Cup playoff that the Czechs won, sadly, from our perspective, I guess. Was that a crazy busy couple of days for you? I presume there were some Irish people, I don't know, losing their passports or forgetting where their hotels were and stuff.
Yeah, it was the last week in March, so we had just had the St. Patrick's Day and Patrick's Festival, and the St. Patrick's Day Parade here in central Prague. It's a brilliant time of the year for Irish people around the world, but particularly for Irish diplomats. And then along came the World Cup playoffs that we were very much looking forward to. And I have to say the level of excitement about that match, it reminded me of Italia 90, which was when Ireland first qualified for a World Cup finals. And really from November of last year, when we knew that the playoff match would happen here in Czech Republic, I was hearing from all sorts of folks from back home, and we estimate that there was somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 Irish people here in Prague for the game or in and around the game. Now, there were only about 1,500 tickets allocated to Ireland in the stadium. So an awful lot of Irish citizens came to soak up the atmosphere, as it were. And I have to say, Irish fans, yet again, they were absolutely brilliant. They really did the country proud, as indeed did the team going 2-0 up. It was painful to end on the wrong side of a penalty shootout. But yeah, for us, it was a busy time. Of course, there were some citizens who needed some assistance with travel documents and that sort of thing. But happily, absolutely no major incidents or mishaps. And it's really terrific that you can have thousands of your country folk come, enjoy themselves and go home safely. And that's really what we were focused on.
Ireland takes over on the 1st of July, the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. What does that mean for Ireland?
It's the 8th time that Ireland will take on the presidency of the Council of the European Union. Personally, it'll be my 4th time to be involved with the Foreign Ministry in an EU presidency. And for a small country like Ireland, having the EU presidency, it's a great opportunity. It's also a challenge for a small administration to be everywhere and to make the contributions that we know we want to. But this has been a genuinely whole of government effort, and the preparations to bring it about have been ongoing for at least 2 or 3 years at this stage, getting the right people in the right places. So it's been, I think we've prepared well for it. It'll be demanding, but it's also a really great opportunity, again, for any member state, but particularly a smaller member state, to be in the chair, to be contributing to setting the agenda, to chairing the meetings. In Ireland alone, there'll be about 270 EU meetings hosted, 22 of them at ministerial level. We'll also be hosting an informal meeting of the European Council, that's at heads of state and government level, and also the next meeting of the European Political Community, which will bring together, I think it'll be about 47 heads of state or government from across Europe, and that will be the biggest diplomatic gathering that Ireland has ever hosted. So it's a major undertaking, but it's one that we're very much up for.
And it's your first presidency as an ambassador. What does it mean for you and your workload?
Yeah, it is. It is my first as ambassador. And for us here in Prague, we will host a number of meetings of EU ambassadors. And for each of those meetings, we would usually invite a prominent, usually political figure, but doesn't have to be a Czech figure, to come and talk to the EU ambassadors as a group. And usually our guests are very kind, and they happily get involved in a Q&A. So that's one piece of work. Another piece of work is outreach. So we'll be, for example, I'll be attending the EU affairs committees of both the Chamber of Deputies and the Senate, also be engaging with a number of think tanks to talk about the presidency priorities of Ireland for the next semester, for the 6 months coming. And maybe also really of interest, I think, to us at the embassy is the opportunity also to get out of Prague and to talk about the European Union, to talk about Ireland, to talk about the Czech Republic and the European Union and Ireland at a number of events. And we're working on those events in a number of centres outside Prague. So I'm very much looking forward to those. And it's also an opportunity to raise the embassy's profile, to raise Ireland's profile here in the Czech Republic, and to, I suppose, to tell our story of EU membership, which has been a hugely positive one over the last 53 years, and also to I suppose, join the dots in terms of our common membership of the European Union. And as I say, on so many policy issues, we are very much on the same page, and to continue to work together with the Czech authorities. Is it fair to say that Ireland is rather more positive about the European Union than the Czech Republic? Certainly, if you go by the survey data, I'm very happy, very, very proud to represent a country where Ireland's membership of the European Union is hugely popular. More than 8 people in 10 consistently tell pollsters that Ireland's membership of the European Union is a good thing for Ireland and a good thing for them. And I suppose, again, maybe here there's a bit of a job of work to be done about sharing the story. Obviously, each member state has a different history, has a different background, different context. But I would argue that as a project, the European Union has been, certainly for Ireland, it's been transformative. And I think for many, many other countries, and I would suggest also for the Czech Republic, it has had a huge and positive impact. And hopefully that'll become more and more apparent as the time goes on. Many thanks to Irish Ambassador Alan Gibbons for taking time out of his busy schedule to speak to me for Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. If you enjoyed our chat and are new to the pod, why not look up some of the earlier editions and subscribe wherever you get podcasts. But for now, that's all from me, Ian Willoughby. Thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk, and talk to you again very soon.